Selecting the best tea for beginners can be a great way of exploring the world of Japanese green tea if you don't know where to start. In this video, we're going to cover the best tea for beginners that you might enjoy if you're just starting to dive into the world of loose leaf green tea. What we're looking for here is teas that most first-time tea drinkers seem to enjoy. We're going to start by ranking the top 5 best beginner teas, and later we'll discuss the types of teas you might want to look into if you're just getting started. Before we get started, it would really mean a lot to us if you could subscribe to the YouTube channel and stay tuned for future tea videos. If you'd prefer to read about tea, we also have tons of great articles on our website, neoteas.com. You can find the link to the blog article in the description of this video. Without further ado, let's get started. The 6 best teas for beginners. After traveling around Japan for the past few years, we've met with dozens of tea farmers and sampled hundreds of different teas. During that time, we've come up with a list of the best tea for beginners, which we're going to talk about here. Number 1, the Bancha Masuda-en. Bancha is a strong contender for the best tea for beginners. This tea is a perfect example of using the less desirable parts of the tea plant and turning it into a good standalone tea, a recurring theme for this video. In the case of Bancha, it's made from the older leaves of the tea plant, which are higher in minerals and lower in caffeine. The Bancha made by Mr. Masuda in Shizuoka takes on a mild, cereal, or wooden flavor that is quite pleasant. The flavor of this tea really lasts from brewing to brewing, so you can reuse the leaves 5 to 6 times before they lose flavor. This lowers the price tag of this already cheap loose leaf green tea, so you can enjoy it for just a few cents per glass. Number 2, the Hojicha Noike. The next tea we will be discussing on our list of the best tea for beginners is the Noike Hojicha. This is a roasted green tea, made by turning the tea leaves in a hot pan right after they've been fully dried. While most Japanese green teas are known for their distinct sweet vegetable or even slightly grassy flavor profiles, the roasting process converts these tasting notes into coffee, caramel, or chocolate. This makes the tea ideal for a cold afternoon, but it can also be prepared as a refreshing cold brew on a warm day. The caffeine content on this tea is on the lower end for 2 reasons. The first reason is that this tea tends to be made from the older tea leaves, which also makes it less expensive. The second reason is that the high heat used during the roasting process can slightly bring down the caffeine content of the leaves. Just like with Bancha, this tea can also be prepared at a warmer temperature. The versatility of this tea makes it a great tea for beginners, but it's also got a flavor profile a lot of first-time tea drinkers are looking for. While most Japanese green teas are fresh and invigorating, Hojicha is warm and calming, which is what a lot of beginners are looking for in a cup of tea. Number 3, the Genmaicha Hagiricha. The third tea on our list of the best tea for beginners is the Hagiricha Genmaicha. This is a tea made by combining roasted rice with tea leaves to produce a unique flavor profile. Most people like this tea the first time they try it, and it's generally a difficult tea to mess up. It's one of the more affordable Japanese green teas, which is perfect for new tea buyers, and it's not quite as sensitive to brewing temperature. The tea is made from older, more mature leaves, which makes it less expensive, but also more tolerant of warmer water. This tea is very low in caffeine, and it has a pleasant cereal note to it that is quite calming both in the morning or in the evening. Number 4, Latte Matcha. Another great addition to the best tea for beginners is the latte grade matcha. While a plain bowl of matcha is certainly an acquired taste, matcha lattes have become commonplace all around the world. This is a good gateway tea to get you accustomed to the flavors that matcha has to offer, without being overpowered by this slightly grassy flavor. Just mix in a teaspoon or 2 of this powder with some oat milk or coconut milk, stir it up, and enjoy. You may find that this is easier than making a morning cup of coffee, and the feeling you get from it should be much more balanced. If you want to level up to drinking bowls of matcha without any added milk or sugar, you can also go for the ceremonial grade matcha. The ceremonial grade matcha is meant to be naturally sweet, and it's much more expensive because of all the added steps in the production process. For now, just stick with the matcha lattes and see how you like them. You can always start here and add a little bit less milk each time. Number 5, the Fukumushi Yamaga no Sato. Finally, we come to the Fukumushi Yamaga. Like Genmaicha and Hojicha, this was another great invention of the 20th century. By steaming the tea leaves for an extra few seconds, a producer can actually make the flavor of the tea much smoother. The longer steaming process breaks down the cell membranes of the leaf, allowing more of it to flow into the cup. This is why you get these deep jade green glasses of Fukumushi tea. The Fukumushi tea is much cloudier as well, producing a richer flavor and less bitterness. A lot of Fukumushi teas like the Fukumushi Yamaga work great as cold brews. The cold water brings out some of the sweeter and more fruity flavors, making this a refreshing drink for a hot day. This is the best tea for beginners that like cool, refreshing, cold brewed green tea. Number 6, the Karegane Sakamoto. Finally on our list of the best tea for beginners, we come to the Karegane Sakamoto. Karegane is a great introduction to some of the sweet and savory flavors you might see in many different types of Japanese green tea. But the powerful umami flavor might be a little bit overwhelming for those who haven't had much experience with Japanese green tea. Karegane, on the other hand, is much more mild. It's made by combining the stems and leaves of the tea plant used to make gyokuro. You get a little hint of this rich, savory flavor, but it's well balanced by the stems. The tea also works great as a cold brew, and it's less expensive than its counterpart. Once you begin to get used to the flavor of Karegane, you can then move up to gyokuro later, but it serves as a good stepping stone in the world of premium Japanese green tea. What are the best tea types for beginners? Number 1, we have Bancha. Bancha is one of the best teas for beginners. While most premium teas like Sencha, Gyokuro, and Matcha are made from the younger leaves of the tea plant, Bancha is made from the older leaves. While the tea plant needs to produce a lot of caffeine to protect its younger, more tender leaves from insects, these tougher leaves produce less caffeine. The tea can also contain older tea stems, which have a tiny bit of bark on them. The flavor of Bancha is quite different as well. While Sencha is stronger on these steamed vegetable taste profiles, the flavor of Bancha rests more on these notes of warm wood, cereal, and popcorn. There is a slight hint of these more citrusy flavors, but they are not too sharp on the palate. Bancha makes for a good snacking tea, as it pairs well with things like nuts and popcorn. This tea is commonly drunk after a meal to help with digestion. Another best tea for beginners is Genmaicha. Genmaicha is made by combining the leaves with the toasted rice. Like a lot of other teas in this list, Genmaicha was invented as a way to make the tea harvest last longer. During times of hardship, people would add the toasted rice to the tea leaves to increase their tea supply. It also helped during times of fasting, as the flavor of the tea is reminiscent of a nice warm bowl of rice. The tea has become quite popular due to its lower price tag, its warm cereal flavor, and its lower caffeine content. This is a common tea to serve at restaurants because it's well liked and low in caffeine. The leaves used to make this tea are the older leaves of the tea plant, making it similar to one of the earlier cheap loose leaf teas we mentioned, Bancha. Hojicha is the third best tea for beginners. This is a roasted tea that was developed in the 20th century, as tea producers again wanted to make sure that they could get the most out of their tea harvest. This tea is also made from the older leaves of the tea plant, but this time they are roasted in order to give them warmer tasting notes of coffee, caramel, or even chocolate. The leaves are either turned in a roasting machine or in a large pan until they are fully roasted. The leaves change from green to brown, and the color of the brewed tea now becomes a reddish brown. This tea becomes more popular in the fall and winter months, and in some parts of Japan you can even see them roasting Hojicha at street markets. This tea is still drunk in the summer and is especially enjoyed as a cold brew. The cold water extracts more of the sweeter caramel notes from the tea, making it a nice refreshing drink for a hot day. Finally, on our list of the best tea for beginners, we have Kukicha, a tea made by combining stems with tea leaves. This tea was a discovery made by the tea farmers, as they had to sell all the tea leaves they produced and were only left with the stems. They found that these stems actually worked quite well when infused, and soon began experimenting with different types of stem teas. Now stem teas have become much more appreciated, with some even preferring them because of their mild straw flavor. The stems of the tea plant do not produce nearly as much caffeine as the leaves, so these Kukicha teas are known for being low in caffeine. Karegane is a more premium stem tea that's made from the stems and leaves of shaded tea plants, like those used for gyokuro. This tea takes on a much sweeter flavor and works great as a cold brew. The Karegane is also a good choice for beginners, as these savory flavors of gyokuro tea are an acquired taste, and Karegane can be a much more mild version. General tips to get started with tea. After selecting the best tea for beginners, you also need to make sure that you prepare it right. We made a quick guide to show you the most important things to know before you make your first cup of loose leaf tea. First, don't use boiling water, but warm water instead. This is the most common mistake people make when preparing Japanese green tea, or green tea in general. Green tea has a higher presence of catechins, which can make the tea really bitter when they are released. Luckily, these catechins are released at a higher temperature, so you can simply brew the tea with cooler water for a smoother and sweeter drinking experience. Next, make sure you use high quality water. It's important to use filtered water when you prepare your loose leaf green tea. The calcium inside of tap water can really interfere with the subtle tasting notes of the tea. When it comes to water, you want to use as neutral of a flavor as possible so nothing steals the show from the tea. Next, you should always go for loose leaf tea instead of tea bags. The second most common mistake people make when preparing green tea is using tea from tea bags. Tea bags often contain incredibly low quality tea, and they have a flat or bitter flavor. When you level up and go for loose leaf tea, not only do you get access to a ton of more variety, you also get to enjoy a richer flavor and drinking experience. Finally, it's important to pay close attention to the brewing times. Just like hotter water can bring out more of the catechins and bitterness of the green tea, so can longer brewing time. For most Japanese green teas, 1 minute is more than enough to extract the flavor. For gyokuro, you can use 2 minutes and a lower temperature for the best results. If you still don't know where to start, you can just try all these teas at once. With our sampler, you can try a few different teas and see which ones you like most. This way, you don't have to commit to any one tea until you're confident that you're going to love it. During our travels around Japan, we have selected a list of the 30 best types of matcha, sencha, Hojicha, Genmaicha, Kukicha, Gyokuro, Bancha, and Kameiracha. We've put all 30 of these teas together in our famous mega sampler. If you're new, this is a great opportunity to try a little bit of everything. We hope you found this video helpful when it comes to beginning your journey into the world of Japanese green tea. If you have any questions for us, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. Again, we would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the YouTube channel and stay tuned for future tea videos. Until then, we'll see you next time.